I'm literally from the future. 12 hours in the future from the other side of this planet. I'll talk a little bit about how Polis, far from being experimental, is now being done daily, as seen as part of the administration's just normal, working system for all the controversial issues. This is Dr. Tsai Ing-wen, our president. I voted for her last year, and we're a very young democracy, 23 million people, and 10% of the Earth's marine species. Dr. Tsai Ing-wen is, in our 6th presidential election, elected the president of human beings, the human species, us. I keep mentioning this because both she and I are advocates for animal rights, and I live with 7 cats and 2 dogs, and we do believe that the human species doesn't have an exclusive privilege on Earth, on Taiwan, or anywhere else. And she ran a platform, thank you. She ran a platform of radical transparency, of marriage equality, of sustainability, and things like that. So I'm very happy when she was elected, and this is our first family. They're literally incorruptible. I mean, you can bribe them with catnips, but they won't interfere with human species affairs. And the 6th presidential election is also remarkable in that it's the only peaceful transition in Taiwan's political history. Because the previous elections, we see like 49%, 50%. We see people unfriending each other after election results. We see a lot of people going to the streets, riots even, in the previous elections, but not this one. Last January, when the ballot opens, Dr. Tsai won by a landslide, but the previous prime minister is an independent. He's Simon Zhang, previously director of engineering at Google, Taiwan's first supercomputer maker, and he's independent. He doesn't have any parties. And the new prime minister, the one that's still now the prime minister for a year now, Lin Quan, is also independent. So the 2 independent prime ministers did something that was unthinkable in Taiwan's history, is that the transition is public. Simon asked all the ministries to publish their checkpoint documents, open data, everything, and upload it to the public internet for the next cabinet to download as the transition team. And I didn't know I would become part of the cabinet a few months after it assembled, but I still look at exactly the same documents so that I can learn what's going on with the island. And so this kind of transparent handoff is born out of Simon Zhang's idea that all the ICT systems produced in Taiwan under $1 million must be made open data by default. And that put Taiwan into the top spot in the Global Open Data Index for 2 years running now. Now take that with a grain of salt because it doesn't measure the impact or anything, but the societal, the cultural impact, I think, is much more important. So Dr. Tsai Ing-wen said in her inauguration speech that we know before in Taiwan, democracy was about a showdown between 2 different values, but now it must become a conversation with diverse values. But how did we get there to this post-party system? We got there like 4 years ago. If you pull a random person on the street in Taiwan and say, we're going to move into a cabinet where not only the prime minister is independent, but there's more independent cabinet members than members of any party in the cabinet, they're like, you're crazy. But this happened because of the Occupy back in 2014. Back in the time, the Sunflower Movement students occupied the parliament because the MPs refused to deliberate a trade service agreement with Beijing because they think constitutionally Beijing is part of Taiwan or something like that. But in any case, they refused to deliberate on the agreement. So the occupiers, far from protesting, did a demonstration in the demoscene sense, meaning we take your parliament and we're going to deliberate trade service agreement with 500,000 people on the street and show you how we can do it. And this is facilitated by professional deliberators and participated by 20 NGOs of the Greens, the Labours, all the people in the NGOs, and supported by the GovZero civic tech community. And this community is very interesting because our call to action is fork the government. We look at all the government websites that we don't like that ends in gov.tw and build a shadow website that ends in g0v.tw. So we solve this discoverability problem. You just look at a government website, change the O to a 0, and get to the shadow government with open data and everything. Quite a hack, isn't it? And also, we release under Creative Commons 0 our copyright and everything, so that when the next procurement cycle comes, many of the GovZero projects then become the official government websites. So that That was the movement. So during the Occupy, the GovZero civic tech people worked as amplifiers to support the professional deliberators inside and on the streets of the occupied site so that everyone just speak naturally, but their transcripts and their translations, logistics, everything is kept on the open source nervous system, just as Colin described, so that it is one of those very rare occupies that by the end of the 3 weeks, everybody converged on a set of consensus, which the member of the parliament then bought in, and it was a victory instead of being more diverse across time. But why are there literally hundreds of professionals like me who spoke to my clients at the time, Apple and Oxford University Press, Social Tech, saying, okay, I have to take a 3-week leave because the island needs me? I think it's because we are the first generation, I'm 36 now, we're the first generation that enjoyed the freedom of speech after 3 decades of martial law and dictatorship. And it arrived in 1989 with the personal computers. So for us, the personal computer revolution and freedom of speech is the same thing. And our first presidential election in 1996 is also the popularization of the World Wide Web. And so many of us worked as campaigners back then. So internet democracy, not two things, the one and same thing in Taiwan. So when we see free software, and we have this very long free software culture in movement in Taiwan, we always think of freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, instead of free of cost, because we know that freedom is never free of cost. Our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation paid dearly for it, and we need to use the software freedoms to keep it free. So, thank you. Yeah. So after the 2014 Occupy, at the end of that year, there was this mayoral election of the 6 major Taiwan cities, and 5 of them are won by occupiers or pro-occupiers who are very surprised that they were elected mayors. It's like something that happened in Spain also. So, and then afterwards, the previous prime minister, a political scientist, resigned, and the new prime minister, an engineer, says, okay, from now on, crowdsourcing, open data is going to be the national direction. And so the occupiers and the civic tech people who supported them are then invited as mentors, as advisors to the public service to solve issues like Uber. Uber is very interesting because it is a virus of the mind. It is a meme, basically, that says the algorithm is better than law and that it dispatches things more efficiently. So you can't really argue with a meme, just like you can't argue with flu or anything like that. It's not in the same category. So there's very little thing that the administration tried to put fines and so on. It didn't work. So, and there's protests, the taxi drivers around the Ministry of Transport, just like it happened everywhere on us. But for us, a deliberation that involves thousands of people is a scaling down of the deliberation we just did with 500,000 people. So I think we can do it. And so we designed the deliberation so that it includes the idea of the focused conversation method, which means listening to each other very deeply at scale. And after you do this, you become immune to the virus of the mind, afterwards to ideologies. Because in the focused conversation method, we separate into 4 different stages. We collect people's facts, first-hand experience that are objective, and then after that's confirmed, we move to collect everybody's feelings about those same facts. You may feel angry, I may feel happy, it's all okay. And after people converge on a set of feelings that resonates with everybody, we then talk about ideas. The best ideas are the ones that address the most people's feelings. And then we translate them into legalese and sign them into law. But to do this, we need to fix the problem that people on the street speak a different language than people in the government. We need translators, we need facilitators. Because without those, people are not even agreeing on basic facts, let alone each other's feelings. And ideas grow into a more potent ideology kind of virus of the mind that blinds people to new facts and blinds people to each other's feelings. So we not only solve this with open data published by government and invited by private sector and civil society, but we also use machine intelligence to try to get everybody's feelings and give binding power to any feeling that resonates with the supermajority with people. And the cyberspace minister at the time, Jacqueline Tsai, said, I will agree to be bound to, by whatever the consensus item, to make a new regulation about e-taxi and use it to negotiate with Uber. And so this is our policy conversation that was seeded with the same URL sent to all the stakeholder groups after a series of pre-meetings that reaches thousands of people. And based on the result of the 3-week policy conversation, we did have a supermajority consensus that we then used to argue with these people. And they all agreed with it, and so it was ratified. And after it was ratified, Uber can't help but play with these new rules, and which is why I was invented this public digital innovation space, taking all the civic tech that we use for the Uber case and try to scale it to other topics. And so this is my ask.pdis.tw page. It is open source software. I don't do exclusive interviews. Any journalist must go through this public channel for me to answer publicly, and the public answers all have these URLs and so on. And this is not just online, but also offline. So I do meet with lobbyists, such as Mr. David Plouffe here, speaking for Uber at the time. And then it's not just on the record, it's on 360 VR record. So you can revisit our conversation. And I would like to thank the My Society folks for doing this Say It structured data command also format, so that every word that David said and I said are also for perpetuity, somewhere you can quote. And so the PDIS is interesting because I'm an anarchist minister. I don't give commands. I don't obey commands. All the volunteers in the public service who work with me are volunteers, and we iterate weekly using business origami with those usual tools. And the first thing that I did as a minister is to recompile the Linux kernel so that it runs the free software Sandstorm hosting environment, so that this is about running all those open source productivity tools and guarantee by our cybersecurity department they will not do surveillance or authoritarian collection or anything like that. And the idea is that we turn those physical objects, those Post-it notes, those face-to-face deliberations, we use the room itself as an ambient computer. Instead of just having people typing into their mobile phones, we now automatically transcribe our weekly deliberation meetings and everything into this room-based service systems, so that people can participate on multiple different sites. And just next week after I went back to Taiwan, we're going to have a public consultation about this on implementing the marriage equality laws and so on. So I have 3 more seconds, but the idea is that voting and collectivism is very easy. Everybody can do it, but there's not much bits. And so by sharing the open data, by having interactive public Q&A forums, by setting up binding forum processes, and by bringing the technology to people, not asking disadvantaged people to use technology, we can build a deliberation system that scales to all the communities and everything. And the process itself is in the commons, so you don't have to go through the Taiwanese government. Anybody, anywhere on the earth can run this idea of taking something that seems like a technological singularity thing that's accelerating and everything, and turn it over to a plurality that listen to one side and then the other side across the time dimension, resolving our differences, and eventually know what we ask of the technology instead of having the technology dictating what we do. So just to quote Dr. Tsai Ing-wen again, we need to build a unified democracy not hijacked by ideologies, an efficient democracy that responds to the demands of the environment, and a pragmatic democracy that let people take care of each other's feelings. And we do this just by listening and building technologies that help us listen to each other. Thank you.